swimming practice is so hard and lasts forever. Ugh.
In sooth, I don't know why I'm so sad it wearies me, but how I caught it, found it, or came by it. What stuff 'tis made of, whereof it is born, I have much to learn. Such a want-wit sadness makes of me, that I have much ado to know myself. We'll be swimming. Oh, hey. What is this? I'm gonna watch this. The famous William Shakespeare was born on April 23rd, 1564, in the town of Stratford-upon-Avon. The Shakespeare family was famous both in a good way and bad way. John Shakespeare and Mary Arden birthed him. His father was a negatively known merchant, glovemaker, and bailiff. William's grammatical life began at the hands of his mother when she sent him to grammar school. William Shakespeare attended the grammar school in Stratford. After he exceeded in Latin plays, grammar, and literature, William left school to marry the lovely Anne Hathaway in 1582. Shakespeare's name would not resurface until about 1592, when he established himself as a successful playwright and actor. The gap between his marriage and resurface is considered the lost years. He would then become involved in Lord Chamberlain's Men and become one of the most famous playwrights of the time. After his wildly successful years in the Lord Chamberlain's Men, later renamed the King's Men, William retired in 1597 in his birth town of Stratford-upon-Avon, in the second most extravagant house in town, considered the New Place. Shakespeare's death is unknown exactly, but it is said that he died on his birthday, April 23, 1616. Even his death directly correlates to his theatrical lifestyle. William Shakespeare, the Merchant of Venice, is one of his more widely known playwrights. The first recorded date of performance was on February 10, 1605. The play was an instant hit to the royal King James. The amusement of the play was having male actors play woman characters play male roles. Shakespeare used one of his defining features in the play, where he minimized the use of props so the audience would focus on the content of the words. The play would resurface in adapted versions many times from the original version to this day. The exquisiteness of the play can be seen through my acting of the later portion of Act 4, Scene 1 of 2, when Antonio and Shylock are on trial and Portia defines mercy while disguised as Balthazar. In the short selection of Act 4, Scene 1, the characters present are Portia, Duke, Antonio, Shylock, and Bassanio. Portia is a wealthy heiress whose father has died and proclaimed that she must be married as a dying gift. Her lover, Bassanio, is keen to marry her but has gotten his friend, the merchant of Venice, Antonio, mixed up in a deathly deal with the cruel Jewish moneylender, Shylock. Shylock takes Antonio to court after Antonio is unable to pay the money Bassanio has borrowed from Shylock because he has invested it in oceanic ships. In return, Shylock demands a pound of Antonio's flesh. Portia intervenes by disguising herself as a lawyer. Antonio is the main character of the play, as mentioned in the title. He feels depressed. Bassanio, a friend, asks Antonio for a loan. However, Bassanio already owes Antonio money, and Antonio has invested most of his money in oceanic ships. Portia's father has died in the meantime, and he urges suitors to pick a box of 3 in order to marry her. The box must contain her portrait, or otherwise they are never allowed to marry. Since Bassanio is not able to procure a loan from Antonio, he asks Shylock, and Antonio agrees to guarantee the loan. Shylock does not ask for interest, but instead, if the money is not paid back in due time, Antonio must forfeit a pound of his own flesh. Launcelot, Shylock's servant, successfully runs away to work for Bassanio, but not until Shylock's daughter, Jessica, gives him a letter to give to Lorenzo. Jessica and Lorenzo plan to marry and convert to Christianity because Jessica despises her father. Lorenzo and Jessica meet later that night. Jessica takes her father's money to help with her elopement. Shylock becomes furious and the need for Antonio's paid-off debt greatens. Unfortunately, Antonio is losing vast amounts of money on his investment in ships. Shylock becomes overjoyed that he may have revenge on Antonio's Christian-like ways. Bassanio is in Belmont to choose the right casket in order to marry Portia. He chooses the lead casket and finds her portrait. They plan to be married until Bassanio receives a letter from Antonio stating that his ships are missing and he wishes to have a reunion before he dies at Shylock's hand. The trial for Antonio begins, and although the Duke hates the bond that Shylock has created, he can do nothing to withdraw it, otherwise he would be going against the law. Shylock maintains that the bond is not to strike fear in Antonio, but real, and he intends to do just as the bond states, which is procure a pound of flesh from any part of Antonio. The Duke at least convenes that the bond must go on trial, and the lawyer is Balthazar, who is Portia disguised as a man. Antonio and old Shylock both stand forth.
Is your name Shylock?
Shylock is my name.
Of a strange nature is the suit you follow, yet in such a rule that the Venetian law cannot impugn you as you do proceed. You stand within his danger, do you not?
Aye.
So he says. Do you confess the bond?
I do.
Then must the Jew be merciful.
On what compulsion must I?
The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath that is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis the mightiest that becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attributes of awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above the sceptred way. It is enthroned in the heart of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show like as gods when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, thou justice be thy plea. Consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy. And that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoken thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follow this strict court of Venice, must needs give sentence against the merchant of Venice.
Despite Portia's elegant speech about mercy, Shylock insists on carrying out his bond. Bassanio urges Shylock to accept his offer of twice the payment instead, but Shylock is insistent. Portia looks over the bond and finds it legally binding and informs Shylock that the doctor is present to decrease the chance of death, but the bond states particularly against it. However, at the last moment, Antonio and Portia find a way around the bond by stating the bond does not take into account the loss of blood. If a drop of blood hits the floor, Shylock would be convicted of contemplation of murder. Shylock is unable to take Bassanio's offer and is then fined by the Duke for contemplation of murder. In recognition of her success, Bassanio offers Balthazar, also known Portia, anything. She tricks him into giving her the ring she demanded he never part with when they decided they wanted to get married. He eventually gives in. The play ends with the couples Bassanio and Portia, as well as Gratiano and Nerissa, becoming conflicted with unfaithfulness. This is because Nerissa and Portia disguised themselves as lawyers and demanded the rings that they had given their husbands. The husbands become overjoyed that the lawyers were their wives, and they promise to be more gracious to the rings. Finally, the lost fortune of ships that Antonio had invested in miraculously found their place in the port. This was certainly a Shakespearean comedy. This short section from Act 4 of Scene 1 is powerful. The defining of mercy and its gifts helps influence the theme of the entire play. Mercy is defined as a blessing, descended from God. The one thing Shylock has in common with the rest is that he still worships God despite the divisions of Jewish and Christian religions. Portia states that the mercy blesses both the one that receives and the one that gives. It is the strongest and most difficult of traits in human beings. It is seen throughout the play, but is indefinitely strongest in Act 4, Scene 1. The influence of this scene creates the idea that Shylock does not possess a sense of mercy in him, just revenge. Shakespearean play critics have stressed the importance of the play to this day. The play was written during a period when racism, love, secrets, and loans were highly present. The play shows racism between Jews and Christians, Most critics think Shakespeare unjustly makes Jews out to be revengeful, hateful men that have no idea how to parent their children. Love is shown between many, even in the form of deep friendship with Bassanio and Antonio. The play is a magnificent work of drama mixed with a comedic ending. The Merchant of Venice so far is the only play that I've read by William Shakespeare that is a comedy. Despite this, however, the play was a wonderful play of mixed feelings and conflictions between religions. Antonio is the merchant mentioned in the title, but he's not the main character or basis of the plotline as much as any other character is. Shylock is the most defining character of the play. He represents the antagonist, solely basing his tirade of revenge to the Christians that curse him as a Jew. The play may not be a tragedy, but deserves to be one of Shakespeare's masterpieces. The Merchant of Venice formally represents the extravagant theatrical writing Shakespeare excels in.
Wow, that was boring.